Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best version of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins, a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth, providing you with valuable insights and actionable tips to thrive. Sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to share their experience and expertise. Whether you're looking to improve your relationships or find greater joy, you're in the right place on your journey to becoming a better you. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. All right, welcome back to Coach Soul. Kenya has a day off, and so we are going to talk about men. And sometimes that can be a touchy subject because men really don't want us to reveal how we feel. And so today, I got a good friend of mine who is going to be able to share about his journey, because men's issues often revolve around our societal expectations. Encourages stoicism and emotional suppression, and it leads to vulnerability and silence. Because, as I've shared in my counseling, men are taught one emotion, and that's anger. Because from a young age, men are often socialized to embody traits like toughness and resilience. And then we have the cultural conditioning that not only discourages men from seeking help when they face mental health challenges, but also leaves them wrestling with feelings of isolation, anxiety, and depression. You know, it's when you get into a marriage or relationship, it also gets magnified a little bit more because the pressure to conform to traditional masculinity, and it creates an internal conflict not only with us, but sometimes in our relationships. And so oftentimes in a relationship with a female, there's a reluctance to talk about emotions because it's deeply rooted in fears of judgment or weakness. And it causes a lot of men to retreat into silence rather to engage in open conversations about their struggles. And so, Brock is my special guest. Welcome to Coach Soul, and good to have you.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
So one of the things that, I want to bring out is, I met you at the men's breakfast several weeks ago, talking about men's issues, and you brought up some things. Let's kind of give a backstory about, let's give the audience a little bit of understanding about what we mean by toxic masculinity. How were you raised, and how did that impact you?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, Steve, I was raised in a household, I think similar to you, military. Both my parents were very young. My mom was 18. My dad was 20. My father, being raised in a household by a military father as well, he was very abusive, physically and emotionally. And I think it's when you hear the term generational curses, that couldn't apply anymore. Like I said, I was raised in a household where I think I had two things working against me. I had two very young parents. 20 years old is definitely not a good age for a man to become a father. They're not done being a kid at that point, that's for sure. And the second thing working against me is honestly a long history of poor examples for fathers. Poor examples for what a man's supposed to look like and supposed to act like. And I think a lot of it is rooted in what you said, that idea that men are supposed to be a certain way. They're supposed to feel a certain way, act a certain way. They're not supposed to admit weakness. They're not supposed to talk about issues. They're not supposed to, in a sense, say they can't do something. So for me, I was raised like I said, I had a very difficult personality, I'd say, growing up. Like what most people would label ADHD. For my father, that was just disrespect. And so from his military background and from his childhood, you don't step out of line, any way, shape, or form. And so my entire childhood was a daily barrage of fingers in my face, of screaming and yelling, of physical abuse, emotional abuse. It was a situation where I think I was a very sensitive kid. I'll say that. I want to go back to even before we're born. I think we're designed in the image of God, and I think we are designed to be a certain way. I think God has so many incredible traits, humbleness, generosity, loving, caring, sensitivity. But then he's also got those other traits that are very masculine in nature. Most people look at God as he's a warrior. He's all powerful. He's just this incredibly masculine, strong individual. But how do you connect the two? And I think for me, I was a very sensitive child, and I was in a sense a very weak child. And I think I had a father that felt like while he thought he was doing the right thing, he felt like he had to prepare a son for the evil of the world. And if that son was weak and sensitive in any way, shape, or form, he wasn't going to make it. And so
do you think, Brock, that generally if your father wasn't military, that regular men would have experienced the same thing? I can only draw with you and identify only because my father also was military, and there were certain levels of discipline, certain levels of expectations that pushed us to a limit to where he wanted us to be better than where he came from. And he grew up on a farm. And so with that in mind, do you think that without military, do you think that transgenerational trauma as men get passed down and then military just exacerbates that for you?
I honestly do. I've thought about that a lot. I think regardless of the military background, like I said, I mentioned the term generational curse. I think regardless of the military background, I think that was embedded in him. I used to always say, when I was a kid, I used to remember like when my dad would get so angry, I would see a darkness. So it was almost like he was one of the best human beings in the world, right, in a sense. He was morally sound. His character was flawless. He cared for people like no other, but it would switch, like it was just like that. And so I think for me, when I look back on it, I see somebody that he constantly wanted me to be better than he was. He constantly wanted me to be stronger than he was, to be tougher than he was, to be smarter than he was. He wanted me to have more options than he had. He wanted me to do something he wasn't able to do. And in a sense, I think that the way he went about it, that was there just naturally, I think genetically, as well as from the way he was raised. But I think it was exasperated by what he saw in the military. I mean, he was in the military, I think 12 or 13 years, but I think just what he saw, I think when he got into the military, he saw probably the first positive role model in his life. So his previous examples were physically abusing him to an extreme level. And so I think he, in a sense, he saw that as positive. And so while, that may have already been in there naturally, I think when you come from what he came from and you go into a situation where the first real male role model you see is a drill sergeant, is somebody with a finger in your face every second of the day, I think you tend to latch onto that.
Well, and you kind of do. I mean, my dad lost his father when I was about 6 months into my mother's womb, and he died 6 months prior to me being born. And so I know my grandfather history, where he was a pillar of the community. I've heard stories over 1,000 people in the community went to his funeral. And then my dad is one that is willing to help. I mean, I remember a time where we were going in New Mexico. We're going to a restaurant, and my dad stopped the car, turn around. Here's this Hispanic guy in the trunk of his car throwing a bottle down, and it was a rattlesnake. And his family was trapped in the car. And so my dad gets out, gets a stick, cuts the head off, and throws it away, and helps the Hispanic guy out. And that's just my dad willing to help.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
what I want to do with our audience is that we're not trying to blame our past on our men, on our fathers.
Yeah.
Because I do believe we make choices, but at the same time, you have to consider the maturity background. So Brock, you're being raised by your dad. My parents are still married. I'm sure your parents, had their issues growing up. What happened at the time that you turned 18 and you got out of the house and you had dad's influence? What happened?
Well, so I'll tell you, I'll go back a few years, but like I said, I was incredibly weak, very sensitive. I learned around the age of 13 to 14 that the only way I could, he used to say constantly, "I'm going to destroy you and rebuild you into something better." And so from a young age, that's what I would hear. And so I took that as, if I'm not a wimp, in a sense, if I'm not emotional, if I'm not sensitive, if I'm not weak, then he's going to love me. He's going to be proud of me. And so along the age of puberty, I think I started to create a persona that was a little bit different than who I actually was.
Right.
And that persona was, this is who I have to be to make him proud. Even though I never actually heard I'm proud. That's just not something that was done. But I created this vision of myself, this version of myself, that I had to force myself to be, in a sense, because I thought that's what he wanted. And so, and when I started to do that, and I started to realize that, that wasn't exactly going to get me the praise I wanted. It wasn't going to get me the I'm proud of you, the I love you. It wasn't going to get me what I wanted. So what did I do? I buckled down and I pushed further. And so, as opposed to saying, okay, this isn't working, and this little thing, this mission I'm on, that's not working, I tried harder. I said, well, I'm not hard enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not good enough. And so I just pushed further. And so, looking back, in high school and college, I had a nickname of it's really stupid, but Superman. And it was, in a sense, it was like I've clung to that idea. I've clung to that like version of myself, because that was just, that part of me was what I turned myself into to get through all the junk, to get through the disappointment, to get through the, not feeling like I'm ever going to hit that mark. And so I just went one further and I said, this is who I'm going to be. I'm going to be Superman. And it's so funny because just recently, my kids and I, there's a show called Smallville, and it's about Clark Kent. Right. And I never watched it in high school. It came out while I was in high school. I never watched it. And I just thought, well, this will be fun. This is just an old show from my past. I'll see if my kids like it. Well, my kids absolutely love it. And we've like 6 or 7 seasons in. And the more I've watched, the more it's just kind of rocked my world a little bit, because it's like I see this Clark Kent who's got all these secrets, and he's got all these things he knows, but he can't tell anybody. And so it in a sense, it couldn't have been more real to me when that hit me a couple of months ago, because I think not just myself, but every man, I think, in a sense, is like that. But for me, it was like he has this secret, and for him, it's a good secret. He's got these incredible superpowers, But for me, my secret's always been, I don't feel good enough. I to the point where I might have a six pack, and I look in the mirror and I feel fat, because that's what my father called me all those years. I could be the strongest human being in the world, and yet I feel weak, because that's what I was told. And so, that's my secret. My secret is that I just didn't ever feel like I measured up, didn't feel like I was good enough. But I kept that secret. And so I see, over the course of these seasons we've watched of Smallville, it's like I watch him, he gets more and more tortured by this secret.
It's just interesting that we hold this energy, this negative energy that makes it difficult for us to talk about, only because society doesn't want to see men weak. We got to have this persona that we're a Superman and things like that. And, the last half of the minutes that we do have, you shared that with the audience that you have kids. So obviously you got married. What's these secrets, and how did it impact your family and marriage?
Well, I'll tell you. So, and I don't think how it impacts, or how it's going to impact your family and marriage, until you get in the thick of things, you get in the thick of life, and because you don't notice those weaknesses when life's going really well. And so when life starts to suck a little bit, when it starts to get hard, that's when they start to pop up. That's when the holes in the wall start to get bigger. And so for me, my wife, we've been together since she was a teenager. I was 20, and she knew nothing about me, really. She just knew what I let her see. And so for me, the reason for that was I don't know that I ever intentionally did that. I think I just didn't know I had those qualities still. I think I didn't know I had those weaknesses, because life hadn't forced them out of me yet. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, when things are going well, you don't see the weaknesses. You don't see the cracks in the foundation. And so for me, we get married, mid-20s, we start having kids, things are fantastic. Work's going well. We got 2 young kids. And then 2008, the economy goes bad. I end up losing my job. The company I was working for closed down. My wife's staying home with the kids. She's a stay-at-home mom at this point. And we have all these goals. We have all these financial goals and these plans for our family, that we're trying to follow them. And then everything's just completely turned upside down, because my high-paying job, it's gone. My wife's at home. What am I going to do? At that point, I felt the world literally was just crushing me, because it's all up to me, And so I think that's what most men tend to do. You tend to think it's all up to me. And so that really magnified during that time in our life. And so for me, that transitioned into, instead of doing what I should have done with my wife and being open and honest with her about how I was feeling, I locked up more, because the weakness felt bigger. And so as opposed to exposing myself, that's what it felt like, exposing myself. So if I exposed myself to her, was she going to love me? Was she still going to respect me? Was she still going to want to be with me? So I locked up even tighter. So,
I'm glad you shared that, Brock, because coming from a therapeutic side, when I'm dealing with men and their issues, and women are trying to say, well, I want him to open up to me. And oftentimes when we do try to open up, and she interjects with something that she's angry about, it shuts us down.
Yeah.
And we don't want to go back and talk about it again.
Yeah.
So do you feel like with all this happening that oftentimes as men, we seem to lose our purpose?
Well, yeah. And so looking back, I don't think I had the ability to see what my real purpose was. I think back then my real purpose was to not be poor, to not be a father like mine, and to be the best husband I could be. That was my only purpose. I didn't see any other like path. I just wanted to not repeat the things I'd grown up with, and so that was just my purpose.
How about you had this hiccup of losing a job, and now it's like, okay, now you got a bigger secret going on within you. So how that impact, we got about 10 minutes left. How did that impact you and your marriage when this happened?
Well, so it's like they say, when it rains, it pours. When that occurred, within the next year, we had our third child, and then my wife began to get something was going on with her. She was just not feeling well. She was sleeping 18 to 20 hours a day. Spent numerous years trying to figure out what was going on, and nobody could help her. They just kind of thought she was crazy in a sense. And this went on for, I would say, 3 years or so. And eventually finding a doctor that was willing to push the boundary and figure it out. And she had a main vein that was carrying blood to her entire left side. It was crushed. And so she spent years like that. And so what I did was I felt like my duty as a husband is I have to dig in deeper and protect. I have to keep her from having any more like muck of life, any more trouble, any more anxiety. She can't handle any more because she's got enough going on. And so I lock up even tighter. I run even faster. So that was my deal. Yeah. And so for me, when things would get crazy for me, it's like I'm swimming, and instead of like reaching for a life preserver, I just start swimming faster. Only I'm in the middle of the ocean and there's no freaking land in sight. So I just swim faster. But yet someone's offering me a preserver. I'm just not going to grab it because all I can think of is I'm just going to outrun this. And so that was just our life for a whole lot of years. And so I thought if I could just swim faster, which in a sense means talk less, connect less, worry less about the things going on around you. Just, just focus on what's in front of me.
I want to bring out something here because I think it's vital for women to understand that man perspective, that when you take the perception of what happened to you from the past and the messages that we grow up on, and all of a sudden you're being rained upon, the thunderstorm is crashing on you. Do you feel like what you did was not good enough? Did you feel like you weren't good enough?
Every day until about 1.5 years ago. Every day. Yeah. No matter. And so for me, it was funny because I kept setting this bar, a financial bar, honestly. That's what ended up being a financial bar,
Right.
And I kept meeting that. And then I still didn't feel what I wanted to feel. So I would raise it. I didn't feel what I wanted to feel again. So I just kept raising it. And so in the midst of chasing that satisfaction of like that feeling that if I just get to that number, I'll be okay. I drown out everything else in my life because I think that, this number or this level of accomplishment, that's what signifies like happiness and peace and serenity. Like that's where it's at right there. And so that's what I was chasing for all those years, but it never went away. It actually got heavier.
Did you try to find ways of connecting with your wife and saying, hey, these are my inadequacies? Or do you think that when we feel these inadequacies, that we don't want to burden our spouse with what we feel.
Yeah, we definitely don't. For me, the worse it got, the harder it got for me to try to connect with it. The harder it got for me to try to talk about it, because I felt less adequate than I did the day before. And so for men, I think the more that stress pounds on you, the more you internalize it, and the more you tell yourself, if I just keep swimming faster, I'll get past this. The more you tell yourself, they're not going to want to hear this. They don't want to know this about me. They're not going to love me. So that doubt builds, like it just gets heavier. So yeah, I think that honestly, the longer as men, the longer we hold it in, the bigger the feeling gets. It's way more difficult to bring it to the surface.
So it's important to bring this out that, here you are married, and it had nothing to do with what your wife was doing. It was what I'm hearing you say. It was more of your internal dialogue, beating yourself up over because of the compounded message that you had when you were younger that you got to perform, you got to do. Yeah. And here you are feeling like you're a failure.
Yeah. And every denial from my wife felt like she didn't love me. She wasn't attracted to me. She couldn't stand being around me. And never was I able to look at it and think, oh, well, maybe she doesn't feel good, or maybe she's got stuff going on, or maybe the kids are stressing her out. I couldn't see any of that. I could just see that, she spoke to me in a certain tone, or she wasn't very responsive when I wanted to make love or whatever. It constantly just felt like criticism. So constantly felt like it was like a denial. It continued to get worse, honestly. I
appreciate this vulnerability, Brock, that you're sharing, because we, as men, we don't share this. Women have the tendency of social circles that they're able to, that's their love language, is being able to communicate and express how they feel. And as men, we just, we're built tough. We feel like we're invincible, like you said, the Superman syndrome, so to speak, that I can take on the world and I can handle and support my family. And then the kryptonite hits us. And the kryptonite is really, if you really want to think about it, is our mindset.
Yeah.
And if we don't get off the hamster wheel, it will plague us into such a situation that I feel we self-sabotage ourselves. That pushes everybody away, pushes our spouses away, pushes our children away, and they're left wondering, where's my husband? Where's my dad? What's happened to this situation? And so I hate to leave it as a cliffhanger, because I know you got more to share. We're going to do part 2 because it's very vital information that men need to know, that they're not alone. And to me, a Superman is what you're doing right here. You're sharing your vulnerability. And so we're going to continue in part 2. Take care and God bless. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Coach Soul, where we aim to empower and uplift you on your journey toward personal growth and well-being to become a better you. Remember, as you navigate through life, you don't have to do it alone. We encourage you to reach out to professionals, seek support from loved ones, and prioritize your own well-being. Stay tuned for future episodes with Steve Hudgins, filled with valuable insights and actionable tips. You have the power to thrive, and with Coach Soul by your side, anything is possible. Until next time, take care, stay empowered, and keep shining your brightest light. For more information, contact Coach at coachedsoul.com.